Chapter 15. "Look, his eyes are opening," said a voice that seemed to me to be coming from far, far away. "Uh-huh," said another deeper voice. "He seems to be regaining consciousness." Everything was so blurry that I couldn't see, and it hurt too much to try to keep my eyes open, so I closed them again. I wanted to ask where I was, what was happening, but though I could get my mouth open, my tongue seemed to take up my whole mouth, and I couldn't make any words work. All I knew was that I didn't feel so hot anymore. I stopped trying to think or to speak, and I just let the coolness spread over my body. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but the next time I opened my eyes, I saw my mom's face floating right above mine. I had never realized just how pretty she was. People said that I had her blue eyes, but the way she was looking at me, hers were much better. They were so kind-looking and filled with love. "Oh, Scott, you're going to be okay. I was so scared. You must have been too. But you were so brave. When the search and rescue team found you, they said you had done everything just right to save your lives." My eyes began to focus. I was alive. Oh, God, I was alive. Then I remembered about the plane and the deputy and the helicopter. As the room came into view, I realized I was in a hospital. There was a tube attached to my arm. Was my little brother okay too? My swollen tongue managed to get around a word. "Robbie," I croaked. "The doctors say Robbie will be fine too. He's in the next bed. He had kind of a rough go of it when he first got here. But you know your brother. You can't keep him down for long," Mom smiled. "He woke up about an hour ago, pointed to his baseball cap, and when I gave it to him, he managed a grin, and then fell immediately back to sleep." "But the bite on his arm, was it a scorpion? Was it poisonous?" "Just a bee sting. I know it hurt him a lot, but Robbie isn't allergic to bees, so he was okay." I tried to smile. "We're both gonna live?" There were tears coming down Mom's cheeks, and I felt her reach over and take my hand. "Of course you are. Of course you are." She wiped her tears away with her other hand. "You just rest now. After you're stronger, I'll explain everything." As much as I wanted to know more, I couldn't keep my eyes open. I had to go back to sleep. I don't know how long I slept, but when my eyes flicked open the next time, I saw I was still in a hospital. It hadn't been just a wishful dream. My head was much clearer now, and my heart pounded with relief. In spite of everything, we really had made it. I turned my head and saw that Robbie was awake in the next bed. "Hey, Robbie." "'Bout time you woke up," he said, and he gave me a thumbs-up sign. "Well, it looks as if the two of you are finally both really awake," came the booming voice of a white-coated man. He took his stethoscope and came over toward my bed. "I'm Dr. Hansen." "Have we been asleep for a long time?" I asked. "Oh, you've both been fading in and out for a while. Robbie gave us a scare for a little bit there, but he's a tough young man, aren't you, Robbie?" Robbie grinned. "Yeah, I guess I am." The doctor examined me and then Robbie. "Well, I'd say that both of you boys certainly are doing much better. You sure had a lot of people worried about you." "We were pretty worried ourselves," Robbie piped in. The doctor chuckled. "You're very popular individuals. Did you know that? First, you had practically every police force in the state trying to find you, and now you have practically every newspaper, radio, and television station waiting to do an interview with you." "We do? Wow, Scott, just like we said in the desert. Remember? Hey, how do I look?" At that moment, Mom walked in the room with a cup of coffee. The doctor looked at her and smiled. "Your boys are both doing just fine. They'll bounce back from all of this fast. Couple more days and it will seem as if this whole thing never happened." I didn't know about that. I didn't think I would ever forget the terrors of those days in the desert. Robbie, however, had other things on his mind. "Well, when are we going to be on TV?" The doctor replied, "Son, you already have been the lead story on TV and the front page of the newspaper." A nurse came into the room. "Sorry to interrupt, but the deputies who found these boys heard that they're conscious and want to know if they can come in. Oh, please, could they come in? Mom asked the doctor. I owe those deputies more than I could ever say. The doctor said it would be all right, and two men in Maricopa County Sheriff's Department uniforms walked into the room holding their hats. How are you guys doing? Asked the tallest of them. How'd you find us? What did you do with us? How'd you keep us alive? Were we almost dead when you found us? Robbie began firing questions at them before I could say anything at all. The taller deputy grinned. Well, you are feeling better. You certainly weren't this talkative when we found you. Good thing, or we'd have been too busy answering questions to rescue you. The other deputy turned toward Robbie. Amazing how fast kids recuperate. These sure don't look like the two boys I put on the helicopter. Helicopter? We were on a helicopter? Oh, wow, and I didn't even know it. Tell me all about it, Robbie insisted. Looking at the two deputies, I said, I had just about given up hope when I saw the plane in the sky, and then I didn't think the plane had seen us. It seemed to be heading away from us. Then it circled back, and it dropped that note. What note? Robbie said. I didn't see any note. I looked at Robbie. You were kind of out of it at the time. That was after you got stung. Huh? Said Robbie. But instead of waiting for answers, he burst in again. Did the plane see us because of the mirrors on the car? I was the one who put them up like that. Did you see the hubcaps? I was the one who got them off the car. But it was Scott's idea to do it. At the rate Robbie was asking questions, we were never going to find out what happened to us. I leaned over toward him. Robbie, let him tell us what happened. I am, Robbie said. I want to know too. So how did you find us? Actually, the taller deputy said, we had no idea where the kidnappers had taken you. We set up a hotline and had news bulletins on radio and TV asking anyone who might have seen either of you or your mom's car to call. Did lots of people call? Robbie asked. The shorter deputy with a sort of big belly answered, we were getting reports from all across the state. One person would call and say he was sure he had seen you in the northwest corner, and then we get another call from someone sure that you'd just been seen crossing the border into Mexico. Though all the law enforcement agencies in the state were cooperating, we didn't get the break we needed until yesterday afternoon when we heard from a nurse in Tucson. Tucson, I said, but we weren't ever even close to Tucson. Right, said the taller deputy, but the men who kidnapped you were. Yesterday, alleged drug dealers in Tucson were involved in a shootout with police. One died immediately, and the other was taken to the hospital. Right before he died, he told a nurse that he'd left a couple of kids in the desert outside of Scottsdale. She wasn't sure that she understood him or that he wasn't hallucinating. Anyway, she got called to an emergency code, and she forgot what he'd said. Even sitting in the bed with covers, I suddenly felt myself shiver. It was just too awful to think someone knew where we were and didn't know it was important. Robbie jumped in. Wow, so what made her call you? The shorter deputy said. Later in the day, she took a break, and while she was sitting in the nurse's lounge, someone turned on the TV. One of the news bulletins came on, and as she heard it, she suddenly thought of the dying drug dealer's words. She began to wonder if he could have been talking about the two of you. The deputy, who'd been silent up to now, broke in. When the nurse called, she didn't sound too sure of herself, and we thought it was just one more tip to be checked out. But we followed up on it by asking a Cessna search plane to fly over the area. It was only a matter of minutes before we got a message back that they'd located the vehicle, and then they'd seen the shelter you'd made and you. Mom had tears running down her face. They called me right away. Those minutes until the helicopter landed and a second group of paramedics arrived were so... Mom couldn't finish. Hey, Mom, it's okay. We're okay now, I said. One of the deputies cleared his throat. Well, we'll be going now, but in a few days we'd like to talk a little with you boys about your kidnappers. Sure, Robbie jumped in. I can tell you lots of stuff. One even had a tattoo, and it was a snake, and it was awful. Before we could really thank the deputies and before they could leave, another man entered the room and introduced himself as the chief administrator of the hospital. Dr. Hansen says you boys are well enough to participate in a brief interview, and the press is all over this place. He turned to Mom. Would it be all right for the boys to hold a very short press conference so that we could get this hospital back to normal? You've all been so wonderful to us. As long as the doctor says it's all right for the boys, we'd be glad to have the press conference. Robbie tossed back his covers. TV, here we come. Not so fast, partner, the administrator said. We'll have some nurses take you in wheelchairs. I can walk, Robbie exclaimed, but the doctor said Robbie might faint, and he would be taken to the press conference in a wheelchair. No way I'm going to faint. I've been waiting my whole life to be on TV. We made quite a group trooping down the hall. The administrator, Mom, the deputies, and the 2 nurses who were pushing our wheelchairs. Now, there are quite a few reporters in there. I don't want it to scare you boys, warned the administrator. Thanks, but it would probably take quite a bit to scare us anymore, I said. Besides, Robbie chipped in, we have this little bet about which one of us is going to be better on TV. With that, the door to the temporary press room opened, and we were wheeled in. I couldn't believe the table of microphones, the cameras, and the photographers who began snapping flash photos of us. The whole room was packed. I wasn't sure what I expected, but this was unbelievable. With my eyes still trying to focus after a flash, I felt someone stick a microphone right under my nose and heard him ask me how I felt. I feel really glad to be alive, I said, and to my surprise, tears welled up in my eyes. A reporter stuck a mic in front of one of the deputies. It's been so hot out. How do you think these boys managed to survive the dangers of the desert? The deputy looked right into the TV cameras. They really used their heads. They survived because they used liquids well, created a shelter for themselves, tried to make signals, stayed with their vehicle, and never panicked. Another reporter shouted, How did you boys know to do all that? I started to open my mouth to explain when I heard Robbie shout, It was easy. It was? Asked the reporter, and all cameras turned toward Robbie. Sure. He nodded and smiled. My mouth dropped open as I prepared to listen to my little brother explain how he had made all the decisions to save the day. I had to admit that he did have a flair for TV. He waited until all the reporters had gathered around him, and then he leaned forward to speak directly into the microphones. You see, my brother Scott over there, he figured everything out. He learned how to drive the car, how to get more to drink, how to make shade, and how to do all the other stuff that kept us alive. The cameras turned toward me. That's so? Called a reporter. I couldn't believe what I'd heard Robbie say. I was in such a state of shock that he'd used his TV time to talk about me that I could hardly speak. Well, we did work together to keep each other's spirits up, I said. Then a reporter turned to Mom. And how do you feel, ma'am? Mom's eyes misted and her voice sounded kind of scratchy. I feel such great joy and such appreciation to everyone who reached out to help my sons. I'm so proud of the way they handled themselves, and believe me, I'll never leave the keys in the car again, not even for a second. Mom leaned over and hugged Robbie and me. Finally, the press conference was over. We were back in our hospital beds, and I had to admit that I was feeling much more tired than I'd thought I would. Dr. Hansen looked at Mom and ordered her to go downstairs and get something to eat. Oh, I really don't want to leave the boys. I can just get another cup of coffee at the nurse's station. Dr. Hansen remained firm. The boys are fine now. You are going to get some nourishment for yourself besides coffee. They'll be well looked after by the nurse. He winked at her. Listen, I have a feeling it will take all your strength to keep up with the mischief these two create, so you better take care of yourself. Mom smiled, and I wondered if she was thinking about the hose we'd brought in the house or some of our other stunts this summer. They certainly can create their fair share of mischief, that's for sure. Then her eyes filled with tears. I'm just so glad they're back. For a while, I almost thought. Dr. Hansen went over and patted her shoulder. The boys are fine, I promise. Now, downstairs with you for some food. The nurse and I will monitor. The boys. Mom blew us a kiss, and she said she'd be right back. The doctor and nurse checked us over again, and then they left the room with strict instructions that we were to stay put. I turned to Robbie, and yawning, I said, Pretty amazing, huh? Robbie leaned over on his side. I'd say, Do you realize that in 3 days' time we got kidnapped, almost shot, left in the desert, drove a car, almost died, rode a helicopter, and we just had as big a press conference as the President of the United States? It was all pretty unbelievable, and in its way, so was something else. Hey, Robbie, I just want to say thanks for the stuff you said in the desert and the stuff you said on TV about my saving us. That was really something. Robbie looked worried. Yeah, well, that doesn't mean I'm going to say nice stuff about you all the time, because I can't. I don't even want to try. I smiled. No problem. And just before I drifted off to sleep, I whispered, You just wait until you see who really looks the best on TV. Oh, it'll for sure be me, Robbie declared, and then he grinned. But we can fight about it for the whole rest of the summer.